Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. I hope you all good. I hope you had a great week, and I hope you're ready for more photography fun. Now, I'm sorry for the delay. We had a little bit of technical issues, probably following the heat wave we have here in United Kingdom. And if you're here with us live, if you can just give me a quick message through wherever you're watching, if you can hear me and see me all right. So we're going to wait a little bit. I know there is fair few people who will join us today. So once again, if you can, just quickly write in the comments or on the Facebook or YouTube that you can hear me and see me. So that way we know that everything is set right. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. If you've never been here before, my name is Jacob Bors, and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. Now, this show I've been doing for about a year, and if you're wondering on how you could join us, it's actually really simple. All you need to do is to join our membership, Clever Photographer Plus. You can find out more about it on our website, cleverphotographer.com. We don't only do the membership; we do other products for photographers, things like overlays, textures, presets, brushes, and so on. And then we have this membership where for a little monthly fee, you will get access to this photography review show. You will get access to our Facebook group, Clever Photographer Academy. And on the top of it, you will get a monthly bundle full of photography tools. For example, this month we just released a night photography bundle full of presets, LUTs, brushes, Lightroom brushes, and so on. So it's really worth it. And if you want to find out more about it, jump onto our website, cleverphotographer.com, and find out more about it there. Now, looking at the messages, it looks like you can all hear me fine and well, so that's good. Greetings to Zdenek and also Dale. Thank you very much for joining me, folks. If you have a moment, make sure that you write us in the comments where you're watching from, how you're doing. And in the meantime, I will continue by describing what we're going to do. So I have about 20 images from photographers from all around the world. And usually the review has three parts. On the first part, I look at the technical part of the image, where basically I look at things like your camera settings, your sharpness, exposure, and all the technical part of the image, trying to give you some tips and tricks on what you could do differently or adjust something. Then we have the second part, which is more focusing on the artistic part of the image. And that's where we look at things like composition, storytelling, main subject, and all that kind of things, which comes more about the artistic view of the image. So I give you my feedback on that. And again, try to give you some tips and tricks on what you could do. And finally, at the end, if I think that it's beneficial, I also try to give you some tips on how to edit the image. Now, for this, we're using Luminar Neo because that's been our software, to-go software for over a year now. However, most of the tools I use in Luminar Neo can be easily used in any other photo editing application. So I really believe that this is beneficial and can help you to move your photography even further. So three parts of the review: technical, artistic, and photo editing. Now we have a lots of photographers to go through, so we're gonna start in a moment. While let's just quickly double check. Zdenek is saying that he just bought extension tubes and macro ring flash. Now, macro photography is definitely something I'm also looking into and would like to try. I even look at some of the lenses, so hoping that I can kind of look at it this summer. So I am definitely looking forward to seeing your results, Daniel, and then maybe we can compare with what I'm going to do. So that's a lot of excitement. We have two sets of macro photos here today, so we're gonna look at both of them. We also have quite few landscape photographers, which is always great to see. Originally, I'm a landscape photographer. That's where I started the journey. I also used to work as a hospitality photographer, so I worked for companies like Trivago, TripAdvisor, and so on. Really photographing hotels, bars, restaurants. It was a lot of fun. It was more kind of like an interior design photography, but I really enjoyed that as well. And now I do a little bit of everything, but still landscape, cityscape, and seascape are my favorite subjects, and big part of my business is coming still from this photography. So that's what we have in front of us anyway. So what we look at the numbers, we've been in for 5 minutes, so let me switch the camera so you can see more of my screen, and I think that we can start reviewing the photos. First one is from David, so we make it nice and big and we start from the technical part. So this picture was actually captured with an iPhone 14. So looking at the details, yeah, so it's an iPhone 14 with the camera settings, which is not always similar to the like a DSLR or mirrorless, but still, just to mention it, ISO 125, 6.9 millimeters on the lens, f1.8, and 1/23,000 of a second. That's a super, super fast shutter speed right there. So looking at the image, which is probably more important and interesting at this moment, the light is quite nice. I really like how it's nicely diffused and decent. Let me zoom in further. The sharpness is pretty good too. Now, because it's a JPEG, you can see a little bit of the distortion there, but I think in overall it's quite nicely crisp. The colors are also standing out really nicely. And in overall, as a panorama crop, I think it's actually very lovely edit. The sky with the blue sky with the white fluffy clouds works very well here as well. And to me, is it? I would say that this is Edinburgh. It's an Edinburgh view. Let me see if I have the Bank of Scotland. Bank of Scotland. So maybe it is in Edinburgh. Anyway, you get this really nice green foreground, and then the buildings which have this kind of typical Scottish color of that kind of stone there, and with the sky, everything works nicely. So I think technically it's actually nicely done. And talking about composition, moving on the artistic part. Now, the panorama works really nicely. Looking at it, there is lots happening. So obviously, the main subject is probably the street and all the buildings there. I think that the trees work quite nicely as a foreground element, even though they are a little bit far. I think they nicely fill the bottom of the picture. So I think that works really well. And once again, the sky at the background with the clouds work actually really well too. One thing I would do, especially on the sky, I would just make it a little bit softer, because when you look at the image, yes, it's really nicely saturated and it has really nice sharpness, but the sharpness is all the way through. It starts sharp right at the beginning of the picture, looking at the trees, and then it's sharp all the way through to the background. So by making everything sharp like this, it's really difficult to say what is the main point and what is the main focus. It's just, it makes the picture really busy. So I think that's something what could be really easily adjusted with something like minus clarity, and then applying it just to the sky, and do something like that. So we can take the image, David, and just quickly move it into the edit module here. And as I mentioned, the easiest way to make the sky a little bit more fluffy is to use the clarity slider, which in Luminar Neo is hiding under structure. Here in the structure AI, I can just take the amount slider and bring it down. And as I do that, it slowly make everything a little bit softer, but the sky included. So now, when I show you the before, how it's really defined like a HDR like, and after, it looks much more natural. And as I say, I would like to apply this only to the sky. So the way to do this here, we just go into the masking, use the mask AI option here, and then we going to select the sky. So usually it kind of scans the image and it gives us different choices. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna click on sky, and that way it will just select the sky, and this fluffiness and softness will be applied just to sky itself. So this is where we are with the soft sky, and I think it looks much better. In overall, what could really help as well is to apply a little bit of vignette, obviously just minus on the vignette, adding a little bit more focus in the center, and you can even top it up by adding a little bit more light again in the center on the buildings. So let's quickly have a look before and after. And I think it's subtle change, but I think it gives you really nice result. So that was David's picture, and we can move on further. Next, we have some pictures from Elizabeth, so we're gonna look at them. Starting from this landscape picture right here, which is beautiful. I love that. I love the rocks, the sky. Um, really, really nice. Dramatic capture. So looking at the camera, this was with Canon RP. I never really heard about that one before, but with Canon camera, Tamron lens, 28 to 300 millimeters. And from the camera settings, we are on ISO 320, 28 millimeters on the lens, and f13 and 1/80th of the second on the shutter speed. So let's just quickly zoom in and see. Actually, the level of details is really decent here. You can see even the little trees up there. There is a tiny bit of noise coming probably from the 320 on an ISO, but still in overall, it's a lovely, lovely capture. So the sharpness, it's tiny bit soft, which again could be coming from the JPEG, but it's not completely crisp. I wonder if maybe the main sharpness is in the foreground. On an image like this, when maybe the depth is there's a lot of depth in the image. Sometimes it's good to make sure that the camera is focusing somewhere in the middle, which in this case, I would be focusing on the rocks, obviously, because when you zoom in, you can see that there is lots of crisp sharpness at the foreground here at the trees, but the rocks are a little bit soft, just a little bit, nothing crazy, but something to just kind of keep an eye on. So that would be from the camera settings. I think I would just keep an eye on my ISO and making sure that we are focusing somewhere in the middle, which in this case are the rocks. The light is quite nice. I quite like it. It's nicely diffused. It gives us nice highlights, but kind of balanced highlights. So that's always good. And again, the sky is lovely with a little bit of drama in it. I think in overall, it's a well handled picture. Moving to the composition itself, I really like the river as a foreground. My only note to it would be that I would try to avoid these little branches here. I know it's not always possible, but maybe with a little bit of a help from Photoshop or something that can help you to remove these branches and really kind of take the distraction away, I think would help. It would make it just a little bit cleaner, but otherwise, I think it works really well. Obviously, immediately when you look at it, you know that these rocks with the waterfall is your main subject. So that's great. We have the focus point right there for us. As the foreground, middle ground, and background goes, I think the river works really well as a foreground. Then we have the trees and the rocks as a middle ground, and then the background of the dramatic sky is a great combination together. So when it comes to composition, my only note here would be to try to avoid these little branches and trees. And if it's not possible to avoid them, I would try to remove them in post-processing. It would make it a little bit cleaner. Otherwise, great. Love the picture, very well done. Now, when it comes to post-processing, not much more I would do here. I think it's very natural edit, so that looks great. What you could do, you could remove a little bit more of the noise by simply using something like luminosity noise removal. So usually you kind of zoom into 100 or 200%, and then just use the slider until usually you go to the point where you remove enough of the noise but don't make the picture soft. So I think somewhere around 20 is looking quite good. Let's just zoom out. I think it makes it a little bit better. Finally, I think the overall picture is tilting just a little bit, so we can simply in a crop tool just turn it around just a little bit, somewhere around here, and make it a little bit more straight. And once we're done with that, I think it's pretty cool. I think it all look really nice. And as a natural result goes, I think it's lovely. Moving to the next picture from Elizabeth, it's a little bit different, obviously, moving from the epic rocks into this park view. So let's again start by looking at the camera details. In fact, it looks like it's the same camera, same lens. Again, Canon here with Tamron 28 to 300 millimeters. And from the camera settings, ISO 100, 28 millimeters, f9, and 1/500th of a second. So ISO 100 is spot on in this case. Definitely the value we trying to go for when we capture landscape and definitely daylight captures like this. 28 millimeters is a lovely wide view, great for this type of pictures. With 28 millimeters, you should get really minimal distortion depending on the lens, but I really like to go for 24, 28. I think that's always good. F9, making sure that we have the details all the way, and 1/500th of a second, obviously at this light should be all good. But that then brings us to the composition and talking about the overall picture. And this is an example where you know that the light was just a little bit too strong. Although it's a lovely view and lovely scene, when I look at it, you know, when you go out and you walk outside, and sometimes the sun is so strong that you start to close your eyes. You like, it's so bright, the sun, that you, if you don't have a sunglasses, your eyes hurting. And that's exactly what happened to your camera. That's the point when you know that the light is too strong and it's not ideal for photography. Now, for example, with something like this, if you would really want to capture it, you could turn it to black and white. However, I think the biggest problem with that light condition when it's really strong is that you also get this really strong shadows and contrast. So it makes the scene really busy. It makes it full of contrast, which sometimes is good and sometimes isn't. But for example, in this scene, you can see how this is all well lit and perfect. On the other side, you could just get a different patches of the shadow. And yeah, sometimes it's just, that's the way it is, nothing you can do. Although it's a lovely scene, lovely picture, the light just wasn't ideal. And that's about it. From the composition wise, again, with a picture like this, when we have this almost perfect symmetry and really nice leading line, I would just suggest to make extra sure that you're really in a center, that really all of it is in line, making sure that it all creates really nice symmetry, because I think that extra few minutes really pay off and can make a big difference. So when you look at it, you can see that you just tiny little bit on one side, and that takes a little bit away from the magic of symmetry, which I think in this scene, which is calling for it, it would be great. When it comes to post-processing, like I say, not much there. Obviously, we could turn it to black and white, which would create a different picture. However, as we have the tulips and everything, it seems almost a shame to do that. So I will leave the image. It's a lovely capture, but when I look at two of them, this one is really epic, and this one just, you are just not very lucky for the light there. So Elizabeth, thank you very much for your pictures. It was a pleasure for me to review them, and we're gonna move forward. Tony, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you're doing well. I know we have pictures from you too today, so don't worry, we haven't reviewed them yet. We're gonna be with them in a moment. Before that, we're gonna look at John Lister's captures. So John, we have two images here from you, 1 and 2. And we're gonna look at them right now. So starting with this one, with the Nikon Z6, with the lens Nikkor 24 to 70, and starting with this one and the camera settings, ISO 100, 24 millimeters, f8, 1/250th of a second. So from the camera settings, ISO 100 spot on, 24 millimeter. Yep, like I said earlier, that's a great wide lens, grade wide use for scenes like this. F8, usually F8, f7.1, F8 gives you a great result for your camera. Usually the sharpness and the quality works super well there, so that's a good choice. Also because there is not really much depth required here. And 1/250th of a second on a sunny day like this, again, it's a good amount for the shutter speed. So from your camera settings, everything is good. Now from the picture itself, the light is a little bit strong, but it's not that bad. Obviously, there is a lot happening on the image. You have a kind of lots of little details in foreground. Then we have the fog. Then we have some more trees. And then we have this sky at the back, which probably really nicely brings us to the composition. And John, the idea of like a clear subject or clear message is just to get an idea of what is it you're trying to show us. Sometimes when you look at the picture, you immediately know the focal point and what the picture is about. Sometimes you're not 100% sure. And I think it's just that, once again, it's really busy scene. You get this trees and branches in the foreground with some texture. Then there is the fog on one side, then there is more bushes on the other, and then we have the really strong sky. So I think, for example, for scene like this, what I would try to do, I would try to position myself more towards right in your case, avoid this whole part, and really just shoot against the trees and the fog, which I think would make a cleaner composition. I think it would the clear, direct message of we have the water with the steam coming out from it, the trees at the background, and the sky. That would be one idea. Or avoid the fog to the most of it and just focus on the branches here, or add more of the branches here as like a main element. So multiple different things what you could have done, but just some ideas of what to try next time. Obviously, the cropping could be a little bit adjusted as well. I think there is a little bit of too much of the foreground, which doesn't really give anything to the scene. So maybe just a really simple cropping adjusted down here. Maybe if I go for free here and just go for something like this, I think that would help. Maybe even removing part of the fog here and maybe ending up with something like this. Immediately, it makes it a little bit stronger. And that's about it. Now, when it comes to the colors, it's kind of interesting. However, there's a lot of this yellow, really kind of ginger colors. Then we have this really other blue. So I just don't know if that's how it was originally, or if that's the part of the artistic decision. Either way, few ideas and few things to think about. Which brings us to the picture number 2. And this one, I think, was captured with mobile phone, if I am right. Looking at the camera settings here, ISO 50, 14.5 millimeters, f3.4, and 455 of a second. That definitely sounds like mobile phone for me. Looking at the picture, I think the first thing, which unfortunately is quite visible, is the softness of it. It almost looks like it's like a hand painted. When I zoom in just a little bit, you can see how we quickly start to lose the details. And even though as a composition and story, it's actually really nice, the technical part, you can see how the camera struggled with the really contrasty situation here. So let's leave the technical part and let's talk about the storytelling and the composition, which I think is really cool. I really enjoy it, but this is very industrial, very kind of like a futuristic scene, but really nicely done. I really like the dark at the bottom, giving us a really nice base for the story. And then we have almost this like silhouette like of these cranes here, which works very nicely with a really strong sunset sky behind it. I think this all together works really, really well. I think the crop is nicely done as well. The overall scene is balanced, so nothing is poking around. And in overall, as an artistic part, I think it actually is really nice. It's really strong, something that can really resonate with you as a kind of urban picture where you have this kind of really industrial foreground and then you have this strong sunset behind. So in overall, I think it's really lovely. But as a technical, I think the camera struggled a little bit. That's about it. For the post-processing, there is not much we can do to it. Also, because of the quality of the image, once we start to push it, you will start to see lots of glow and haze around. So you kind of want to avoid that. Then it brings us to the next photographer, Margaret. Margaret, thank you very much for sending your picture over. I saw lots of chatting with Zdeněk, and Zdeněk, thank you much for being thank you very much, Zdeněk, for being helpful on all of that. That's really, really nice from you. And I'm really happy to see your images. So, Margaret, let's jump on your picture right here. So what do we have? This kind of landscape picture, which is quite nice, actually. We get some nice foreground here, a really nice coast. The only shame, Margaret, is that it's really low resolution. So when I zoom in, you will see how it immediately gets really pixelated. So it's only about 1000 pixels big and really small in the size as well. So that is a little bit of a shame, Margaret. If you're gonna join us in the future, make sure that you try to send us as big file as possible. However, since you joined us today, I really wanna review the picture and give you some tips and tricks. So let's do it anyway. So we forget the technical part and we move on the artistic part, the composition. I think the first thing we need to do is to make sure that the horizon is straight. That's the first thing we should take care of. So let's take the image, quickly jump into the crop here, and just make sure that our horizon is straight right here. Once that's done, we can just hit enter and then we can continue. As a composition goes, I think it's really nice. The only problem is that the light is a little bit strong. And again, you get this really strong contrast and shadows coming from that side. So the sun was somewhere there, or in your case, probably there. And as it was shining against these buildings and cliffs, it was creating these really dark areas. But if I would forget the shadows, I think the scene is actually really nice. Again, the foreground of this little cliff here, and then the leading line of the cliff, the depth created with the buildings, the horizon, all works really nicely together. So as an idea is great. Now what you would need is maybe just different time of the day, or maybe same time of the day, just not as sunny. So I would definitely in past capture picture like this, but maybe the sky was really overcast, and when it's really cloudy, it creates a really nice diffusion and the shadows are not that strong. So that would be what I would do there. So keep an eye on the horizon, and that's about it for the moment. If we would want to do some editing, we would probably need a little bit better version of it, like a higher resolution. But in overall, what I would do, I would probably add a little bit of a vignette just to, maybe let's try it since we're here. Add a little bit of the vignette to close the image. Maybe even just position it on the actual coast here. Then maybe make it all just a little bit warmer. In this case, maybe remove some of the dehaze as well, just to do something like this. And then we could do a little bit of dodge and burn. You could even replace the sky, which on a picture like this, I'm really not sure what it's gonna do, but let's try anyway. Let's go for daylight sky and place there something like this. Let's see if it's gonna do something for us. Yeah, and it did actually. So maybe let's try a different one. Something like this, just to get a little bit more texture. We could make it a little bit more soft, so it's not so much in focus. And suddenly it's starting to get something. So just something a little bit different, what you could do to push it around, maybe a little vignette, maybe a little bit of texture in the sky, and a little bit less contrast, and you can get a lovely picture. Anyway, Margaret, thank you very much for sending it over. It was a pleasure to review it. And if you have more pictures, make sure you send them for the future episodes. All you need to do is to just try to send us as high quality as possible. Moving to macro photographers, Zdeněk and Tony. Tony, there you go, your time to shine. So we have a fair few. Now, we're not going to look at all of them, but I'm starting right from here. These are Gosenberries or something like that. Anyway, it's a lovely capture. Looking at the camera, Canon 50D with 18 to 135 millimeters. And from the camera settings, ISO 200, 135 millimeters, f5.6, and 1/50th of a second. So as the camera setting goes, your ISO 200 with a really detailed shot is fine. 135 millimeters, obviously really punched in. F5.6 give you actually a really nice depth. I quite like it. I like the fact that you can still recognize a little bit of the back and you get the whole fruit in focus. This little leaf here actually works really well. Again, giving us a little bit of the depth. It gives us a little bit of the foreground. So that's quite nicely done. 1/50th of a second works really well. And in overall, the diffused light is actually really nice. It's a lovely, fresh scene, actually quite nicely balanced and nicely done. So overall, I quite like it. I like the position of the three fruits, coming back to composition, and the rule of three really works well here. Obviously, you can have 1, 3, 7, 5, and so on. In this case, I think the 3 works really well. And the fact that you managed to keep all 3 in focus is great as well, Tony. So I really like this one. Now, in overall, it's just maybe it's just the picture, the size of it, but I think it's just it would need a little bit more sharpness for me. And that's about it. I think the rest is nice, and it's a little bit noisy. You can just see it a little bit around here. Now we could try to fix the noise with a little bit of denoise tool, or obviously we could do the noiseless AI, but I don't like to do it on a live video because you never really know what it's gonna do. So maybe just somewhere around 20 on denoise to remove a little bit more noise. And then we can use the tool which is called details here in Luminar Neo, and we push the small and medium details. And what we're going to do, and maybe a little bit of the large, we're just gonna actually apply this to the fruit. So we're gonna specifically locally add sharpness only to the fruit and maybe the part of the flower, but nowhere else. The rest can stay nice and soft. Now this is obviously very fast selection, but just to give you an idea. And let's see before and after, and I think that's a little bit better. To top it off, I would add a little vignette. So let's just close it somewhere around here, and maybe focus the vignette on the fruit itself. So something like this. So let's have a look. Before and after, just a little bit better. But in overall, Tony, love the image. Very, very good. Moving on, more pictures from Tony. Let's see which one we could talk about. A little bit too strong light for me on this one. Kind of heavy shadow at the back and some shadows here. This one, I think I found this plant a little bit distracting. I think you're either looking at one or the other. And again, a little bit strong light at the back. This is quite nice. But what I really like on the first one was that the depth was really nicely done. You know, the bright green really stand out on a darker background, where on this one, the flower kind of a little bit disappear at the back. And actually, this one is really nice as well. So let's talk quickly about this one. Again, Canon 50D with the ISO 200, 135 millimeters, f7.1, and 1/200 of a second. Lovely capture, Tony, with lots of details again around the flower itself. Lovely light again. You can see how the diffuse light really works in this case, and how it makes all the difference. There's just no destruction of heavy contrast. Everything is nicely lit. We get nice color, nice sharpness, and we don't have to worry about just lots of highlights, which generally distract the viewer. So that would be my point for that. Again, I think that the sharpness is really good, although I think there is more sharpness on the kind of around the flower rather than the middle, but still, I think it's very, very cool. Really like it. My personal thing when we talk about composition would be I would probably crop it a little bit tighter. I think there is lots of other plants around which are not necessary for the image. So personally, I would crop it definitely tighter, and we can move immediately to that just using the crop tool. We could use one of the presets. Obviously, a square crop would work really nicely here, and all you would have to do is to just kind of position it around the flower itself. When you use it, definitely you want to make sure that the whole flower is in the scene. And to kind of take away the distraction of the other flowers, again, just use something like vignette and make everything a little bit darker. If you want the inner light, you can make the center a little bit lighter. And then we can add a little bit of extra structure to make the picture stand out. I would even add a little bit of warmth, just a touch, just to make it a little bit more natural. This looks kind of nice, but very sad. I think with a little bit of warmth and glow, I think it can be even nicer. And that's about it. If anything, maybe just a little bit of extra contrast, and then you get something like this from this. So this is kind of the start. This is the end with a little bit of cropping. I think it's a lovely result. So Tony, thank you very much for sending all your images to us. It was a pleasure to review them for you, and make sure you send us more in the future. In the meantime, we are moving to Zdeněk, who is now building up, gearing up for macro photography as per his message. So let's jump to it. Zdeněk, I hope those are all yours. Let's have a look. I'm not sure about this one. Is it David? This is David. So we move this one. We come back to your picture, David, in a second. And in the meantime, we will take these. And of course, I have completely managed to remove Zdeněk's. So this one is David's, and these two are yours, if I'm right. So it's the drops and the, what is it, scarab or dung beetle. There you go. So Zdeněk, if you just shoot me in a message saying that they are yours, but this one has your name and the second one has your name too. So let's say that they are yours. So let's jump straight to it. Starting with this one. Zdeněk. Canon 600D with the 85 millimeters. And from the camera settings, ISO 100, 85 millimeters, f16, 1/200 of a second. Zdeněk, where to start from? There's just lots happening. As soon as I look at the image, there is lots happening there. And looking at the technical part, obviously, there's a tiny bit of noise, but that's the low light situation. Nothing you can do about it. The sharpness is very, very good. There's lots of details on the droplets, on the little, even on the little lines under the leaf. That's really, really lovely too. You even got a little bit of like a star effect on the reflection here, which is cool. But I think one thing that kind of stands out is really heavy contrast. You get this really dark background, and then you have this really bright subject. And yeah, it's a little bit visible. It is not very natural. And I think as you can see the light coming, obviously the human eye will quickly realize that it was lit by something like a flash or artificial light or something like that. So that would be my one thing. Also, I don't know if this is a sensor dust in this part or whatever, but it's a little bit distracting, so I would remove it. Which brings us to the composition itself. Now, I love this bottom part in the contrast with the background. However, I think the top two are a little bit extra there. I think they take a little bit of attention away. And when you look at it, you're kind of not sure what to focus on. So I would have wished that you would just focus on this one leaf. There is enough drops on it and just really take it from there. So build it up from really minimal composition rather than starting with many. And then you have to work around with different sharpness and different focus. So for example, you have all of this in focus, then you have this really soft, then you have this one little bit less soft, and it's just kind of confusing on a depth. So that's what I would do. I would just try to focus on this leaf right here. Now, obviously, because of the shape, it's a bit difficult to take it off, but just to give you an idea, once we remove most of the top and make almost like a panorama capture, you can see how much more powerful immediately it is. The distraction of the others are gone. Now we have the main subject with the drops. Immediately you kind of start to think about the nature and how amazing it is, and how amazing is the fact that you were able to capture it with the camera. So this is what I would do. Just focus on smaller subjects, smaller parts of it, and bring them up like this. So that would be one thing. Also, the second thing is I would just try to make the background a little bit less dark, like a less contrast, to make it a little more natural. I don't know if the enhance, yeah, so maybe just something like this, so we have the background little brighter, and it just looks a little bit, let me show you before and after, and it just looks a little bit more natural for me. Obviously, we could apply a little bit of denoise here just to take care of that, and we would end up with something like this. So few different things to think about, Zdeněk. I hope it was helpful. And now we can move to the next picture. Picture with the dung beetle. Dung beetle. How about that? Now, let's start first by looking at the camera details. Canon again, 600D with 85 millimeters. And from the camera settings, ISO 200, 85 millimeter, f16, 1/200 of a second. Now, the back itself is nice and sharp, although you get a little bit of depth on the legs there, but most of it is in focus. I think again, looking at it, the problem is a little bit of like a strong highlights. I think that's maybe one thing we kind of need to work on, is to find really nice diffuse source of light. So the light kind of spreads around and everything will be really nicely. Basically, the light will go on everything really nicely and evenly. So that would will help a lot here. Other than that, it's lovely. Now, when I look at it, obviously, what I think one thing is that the background and around is really bright and it has this kind of color where with him, he's darker. So obviously, the eyes get first quickly attracted to the background, then they come back to the beetle, which is not a problem. However, I think in overall it works really well. I would use a little bit of a vignette to close the background. I think the spacing is nice, the framing is nice too, the texture is lovely. Yeah, so I think first thing we would need to work on this one is just the light. More diffused light, everything nice and evenly lit, and that would be my first goal on it here. Let's have a look. If we could just use again enhance AI a little bit to brighten everything up, and then to counterpart it with vignette, focusing on the bug itself. So something like this. And I think immediately we get a little bit more focus on the animal. Let me show you before and after. And immediately we are focusing more on the animal itself. Of course, that you could do a little bit of dodge and burn. You could add a little bit of structure. And in overall, I think I would adjust a little bit the saturation for the image, simply because the main subject doesn't have much saturation anyway. So we're not going to lose anything. So it's the same technique as I showed you before. We take the saturation slider all the way down, and then without looking at the saturation slider, we look at the image and we go as far as we like. So I think somewhere around here. And now when I look at the saturation, we are somewhere around -4, -5, which is fine, but it just takes a little bit more distraction away from the image as well. So that's about it. Anyway, Zdeněk, I hope this was helpful. The first one was great. This one is lovely too. I am really curious and excited to see your journey in macro photography, and I will definitely share my results with you soon as well. Which brings us to last two photographers, where we're gonna look at some nice bird photography. So starting with Jag. Jag, we have some stunning eagles here, beautiful captures. Bald eagles. This almost looks like he's standing on him, which obviously he's not, but let's quickly start with the camera. It's a Canon R7 with the 100 to 500 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 1000, 500 millimeters in, f7.1, 1/2000 of a second. Now, as a camera settings for wildlife photography, it's all good. I'm also impressed by the high ISO and the result that's coming from the camera. I think it's super, super sharp. The light is quite nice too, obviously, with the sun coming from this side, giving them a really nice light from the side, which is lovely. The texture is great, and the movement of both of them is very lovely too, Jack. So well done on this one. Now let's just quickly talk about two more. So maybe this one, which I think the composition again is stunning. This also is captured with the Canon R7 with the lens 100 to 500 millimeters. And from the camera settings on this one, ISO 800, 500 millimeters, f7.1, and 1/3200 of a second. Jack, I also love this one. This one, I think I like even more. The light from the front works really, really well. The sharpness, the level of details is great. Now there is a little bit of noise, probably more noise visible on this one than the picture before, but it doesn't matter. I think the combination of both of them, one in front of each other, is really powerful. And this is one of these images which I can totally imagine to print and have them on your wall in a living room or somewhere, because it's just very powerful and really beautiful. So Jack, well done. Really, really like this. Beautiful composition, great framing as well, with lots of lovely space around. Really nice depth with not completely blurring the background, just have a little bit of it, and just great. Great editing, also very natural. The only thing I would try is to push a little bit more the noise reduction if I could, but that would be about it. Do I have one more? This one is also stunning. Obviously, the eagle carrying the fish is great capture as well. Lovely tight crop. I also really like that if you can do that. You know, obviously, you don't always have to have an image of the animal in the full size, as long as you frame it in such a way that people understand that that was what you wanted to do. So in this case, I think with the fish and with the head, with that amount of details, it's also lovely. So, Jack, thank you very much for sending the pictures over. It was my pleasure to review them for you. I can't really say much wrong about them. I think they are stunning. Obviously, you could do a little bit of local adjustments by maybe making the vignette a little bit stronger, but in overall, they are lovely with lovely natural look. And that brings us to Ken. Ken, it's been a while. Keep looking at your pictures in the academic group. Thank you very much for sending them over. And today, finally, we see some pictures again from you back in the photography review show. Now let's see if we can actually find out what we're looking at. Usually Ken writes what it is, but this time I'm not sure. Anyway, doesn't matter. Let's start here. So this looks like it was captured with Coolpix camera. So we don't really have to worry about the data here because they don't always say the truth. So let's start by looking at the images. So the sharpness is very decent. Now I know what camera is Ken using, so we need to understand that there are certain limitations on the camera, but I think this is still a lovely picture, lovely sharpness, lovely light as well, with a little bit of bright light coming from here, giving a really nice light to the animal, but it's still kind of soft, giving us a nice shadow at the bottom here and creating a really nice scene. But I think what these two pictures are much more about is the subject, the very natural contrast of the scene, which works really well here, of the dark animal with the red and white on it, with the contrast with the green background is really, really nice. This is also really lovely framing. We have the bird sitting with everything there. Then we have space in front. We have lovely depth being showcased with the leaves starting from being really sharp and slowly, softly going into this really blurred background. So in overall, I really love this one. Very nicely done. And this one is lovely as well. It's a little bit soft, but again, when it comes to storytelling, you look at the image, you immediately know what you're talking about. Lovely light coming from this side of the animal. It's not distracting, it's actually helping the overall scene. Again, lovely space in front of the bird, which is really nice too. The two little sticks here, or bamboo sticks, gives us a little bit of depth. Now, obviously, I wish that this one wouldn't be there to take to obviously overlay the animal, but I still think it's really, really lovely and well done. So as a storytelling, Ken, well done. Great two captures, lovely work with the contrast, lovely work with the depth, and just really nice framing. Which brings us to a little bit of post-processing. I think we don't have to do much here. Maybe a little bit more denoise on the luminosity slider, a little bit of different light, and definitely vignette, which would help to just kind of create a little bit more focus on the animal itself. What we could do, a little bit of dodge and burn on the animal, but because the pictures are a little bit fragile, they are not 100% sharp, I don't want to push them too much because it will just bring more artifacts and noise out. So something like this, I think, is very lovely. Just a little bit of extra details with the details tool, and we leave it there. So that was Ken's pictures. And quickly coming back to David and his second picture, to make sure that I also review it for him. So a little bit more of macro photography here, David. Again, coming from your iPhone. Now comparing with the first one, this one, I think the main thing which I would keep an eye on, David, is the light. I think the dark part in front really take a lot away from the image. The highlights are also a little bit too strong, and I think the crop is a little bit too tight there. Now, the details on this part works really, really well. However, I think it's just really busy image with lots happening and heavy, heavy contrast between the two parts. So not much I can do there when it comes to post-processing. Anyway, I still thought that I could give you a little hint on where we are with this image. Folks, so quickly into your messages. Did I miss anything? I don't think so. We are in 50 minutes into the live session, so I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Now, what we have in front of us in June. Quickly, if I just open the calendar, I think we have 2 more sessions in front of us before I leave to France, where I'm going to go for 2 weeks photographing the lavender fields and the white horses on the beach. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So we have one, two. So we have two more photography review shows in front of us here in June. The dates and the links are in the membership, or I will post them right now on the Facebook group to make sure that you can join us. I was really happy to see all of your pictures. It's great to have a little bit more pictures to review. It's always my pleasure to do that for you. And in the meantime, whatever you do photographing, make sure that you keep sharing it at the Facebook group or with us. And if you have anything, any questions or anything I can help you with when it comes to photography, my direct email is jacob@borsphoto.com, and I will be really happy to help you there. Folks, take care, stay safe, and until next week, take care.